right. Welcome to the Inside the Box podcast. I'm Hans Zappin, and welcome to the new year. So we took a bit of a break over the holidays, and we're back at it. So thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. I am thrilled to be in studio today with Craig Kidd. But before I get to him, I do want to just give a quick shout out to the Alpharetta Family YMCA. Those of you who know me may know that I'm very involved in that organization, and we are in fundraising season. So I am helping them raise some money for some of the things they do over there. They have a focus on swim lessons for children who do not know how to swim. That is actually one of the leading killers of children under the age of 16. And the YMCA is being proactive about that and giving free swim lessons to anyone that does not know how to swim. But they are also very active in the foster care community and giving camp scholarships to those who need them and a slew of other different things. So I would encourage anyone who is listening to get involved in their local YMCA. I'm involved in the Alpharetta YMCA. But if you're listening anywhere around the country, if you go to the YMCA website, you can find your local YMCA and get involved. And I promised that anyone that donated to this year's campaign, $100 or more, I'd give a shout out on this week's episode of the Inside the Box podcast. And I'm very pleased to have a few shout outs to give. So Lisa Schipple, who is a local Alpharetta attorney and the current chair of the Alpharetta Chamber of Commerce. Dan Merkel, who is a commercial insurance agent and a Alpharetta City Council member, was a donator. Rita Brown, and a friend of mine who wishes to remain anonymous, but she knows who she is. And Ben Burnett, local Alpharetta City Councilman, contributed to this year's campaign. So thank you, everyone, for contributing this year. And we plan to do this on every episode of the Inside the Box podcast until the campaign ends. So if you would like to donate, please feel free to message me, and I'll include a link to the campaign page in the show notes if you would like to donate directly. So thank you, everyone, for donating. And with that, I am going to get the show started. Craig Kidd is our guest on the Inside the Box podcast today. Craig, thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for first time I've been in the building, so looking forward to it.
You know, it's one of the most fun parts that I have with the Inside the Box podcast is it's actually a great way to meet people.
That's true. We've never met, so.
We've never met, and we've probably been working together in some way, shape, or form for years now.
And I've been reading your family newspaper for however long it's probably been. And when did you guys start?
So we started the Johns Creek Herald in 2006.
Okay.
So I think that was about 2 years before the city of Johns Creek incorporated.
Yeah, about a year. Yeah, 2007.
We'd like to claim that we were one of the spearheads of getting the city started.
It's been
who knows?
The city's been a tremendous success. So the more people who want to claim responsibility for that, I'm more than happy to accept it. What's the old quote? Victory has 1,000 fathers, but defeats an orphan.
Absolutely.
So hey, add on. I got no problem with that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we are really, the AJC distributes their publication throughout the city of Johns Creek, but we're the paper record for the city, and frankly, far surpass what AJC is able to circulate throughout the city. And we've always had a great relationship and experience covering the city.
Yeah, I always sort of got the impression that the AJC used to do a lot more local coverage than they do now. I mean, obviously, there's no way I could prove that. But I just get the feeling now you don't look to them to see what's going on in Johns Creek or Cumming or Alpharetta, what have you. So it's
anything,
it's
probably
guys.
The opposite at this point. They probably look to us.
I would think
to lead on some things like that.
I would think so.
No, but we so Carson Cook is our City of Johns Creek reporter, beat reporter, and I know you've met her. And talked to her
very nice lady from Chattanooga, Tennessee. So.
She's enjoying covering that beat.
Excellent.
And this is really her first big professional coverage that she's been working
I've
on.
complimented her a couple of times on her stories. I thought that they've been fair and et cetera. But I've also given her a couple of thoughts about why did you phrase it that way?
Sure,
sort of thing. So
hey, that's what we're here for. So keep them coming. Good, bad, and indifferent.
Yes,
that's what we're here for. But no, we have our company, App and Media Group, has very closely paralleled, some of the growth that we've seen in Johns Creek and Milton and Sandy Springs and what have you. So it's been an interesting experience, to be sure. But I'm thrilled to have you on the show today, Craig.
Thank you.
And to hear a little bit about your story and your experience in Johns Creek. First I wanted to start out with, what's new in Johns Creek? What are you working on? What's the mayor working on? And what can our listeners who are from the area or specifically from Johns Creek, kind of expect in the next couple months?
Well, we have a couple exciting things going on with trying to fix our traffic. The biggest intersection in Johns Creek, as everybody knows, is State Bridge and 141. I just call it the big intersection. I've been with Johns Creek for a year, and I'm trying to have the other staffers embrace that term. It's not working. They still call it, and they call it Medlock Bridge and State Bridge. I call it 141. I find it easier that way. But it's a T-Splosh intersection. So T-Splosh funds will be used for this intersection. It's really an amazing spot. I mean, you have 3 counties come together at this one intersection. Gwinnett from the east, the rest of Fulton County from the west, and then you have people in Forsyth who use 141 who come down to downtown, who don't take 400. They use 141 through. So it's really an amazing location for that. And as anybody who's gone through it, it's going to be a difficult one to fix.
Sure.
The main reason I think, and I am not an engineer, I work with a lot of wonderful engineers who know what they're talking about, and I like to joke with people. I said, building a road isn't like what it was in 1877. You just don't put down some dirt or some gravel and there's your road. The number of factors and things that go into building a road or an intersection improvement is just startling. It's really dumbfounding how much goes into it. But they had about 35 different initial plans, initial things that they could have fixed. They brought it down to 5, and they introduced those 5 options to the city council. It may have been in December was the initial.
Now, when you say they,
no, I'm sorry, the Johns Creek Public Works Department. 141 is a state road, hence the 141. But Johns Creek is responsible for any improvements on that at that intersection. Now, the state of Georgia reserves the right, if you will, to make their own changes on 141. Now, there might be some legal issues there regarding, what can what, and that's in and of itself requires a team of lawyers to figure out sometimes.
Be a whole separate podcast.
Exactly. About several. But no, this is being handled by the Johns Creek Public Works. I'll try to cut down on the pronouns. But so 5 were given to the city council. A second presentation was made a couple of weeks ago. The Public Works Department has made their recommendation to the city council for what's called a Michigan Through You.
Okay.
Which I ask anybody who wants to go into great depth about what that is to look into it online, etc. My very amateur way of explaining what it is means it basically eliminates all lefts at the intersection. Mm-hmm. So if you're going northbound on 141, instead of making an immediate left onto State Bridge and where the BP is and the not Taco Mac, for the taco place. It's not Taco Mac, it's the other one.
Yeah.
They instead of making your left right there, you'll go straight through the intersection 141 and then make your left 1 block up.
Okay.
So it removes all the lefts.
Okay.
Now it's, as with anything in Johns Creek, it's not without its detractors and not without some naysayers. So it's up to the public works staff and to the city council to sort of work their way through it and come up with the best idea for that intersection. But in my own opinion, at least, it's the most important transportation decision we've made as a city in the 12 years, other than the approval of T-Splosh, but that was a decision by the voters.
And you've not only been employed by the city, you've lived in Johns Creek for quite some time.
I have. Actually, my family moved to Rivermont in 1981. I was born in New York, born in Long Island, or as I like to say, Long Island, just to try to get some local feel into the voice. But no, we moved here in the fall of that year. And at the time, it was basically Holcomb Bridge. It was Rivermont. It was Martin's Landing. It was Horseshoe Bend. Those were the three subdivisions. Mm-hmm. I went to school at Dolvin Elementary. I like to joke that you don't see too many alumnus of Dolvin walking around Johns Creek, as adults.
Sure.
Then I went to Holcomb Bridge Middle School, and then Crestwood High School down in Sandy Springs. And then when they closed Crestwood and opened up Chattahoochee, I was actually the first graduating class at Chattahoochee High School, class of 1992. So I just dated myself there. So yeah, so three years at one and then one the other. So I like to joke to people that nobody can out Johns Creek me. And my parents still live here, and I live in Johns Creek as well. So.
Well, I know you're a Patriots fan.
I am a Patriots fan. Yes.
I mean, I guess I'll give you some congratulations.
Thank you. I'm actually. You should double congratulate me. I actually root for all New England sports teams.
Okay.
If you want, I can explain why. So, and I'm more of a baseball guy than a football guy. So I'm a big Red Sox fan, and I'm raising my son to be a big Red Sox fan as well. In fact, he's going to embarrass me quickly because whenever we see somebody wearing a Yankees hat, he whispers to me. He says, "There's an evil Yankees fan." Uh-huh. And one of these days, he's going to say it too loudly. We're going to get into a problem.
There's plenty of Yankees.
There are plenty of Yankee fans. Yeah. I mean,
Daniel's one of them.
The Yankees are unique in that I was listening to, I can't remember if it was Atlanta Sports Radio, and they asked a question for people to call in. They said, name something your rival has done well. And, I was thinking the Yankees, and I said, what the Yankees have done well is that they have gotten a whole generation or two of non-Yankee fans to wear Yankee apparel.
Sure.
And to buy it and to make money off it. And you're making money off these guys who may never have seen more than 2 innings of a Yankee game in their life, but they're making money off it. So God bless them.
Yeah.
So,
well, don't rule out the Braves for your kid. I mean,
I'm sure. I mean, all of his friends will be Braves fans.
The Braves are just fine.
I got nothing against the Braves. I went to
maybe he can have an NL team and an American League team.
Well, I was always partial to the Reds. I'm not really sure why.
Stop it.
Because who works for the Reds? I don't know who works for the Reds. But
well, all right. So we'll get serious again for a second.
No.
So back to traffic in Johns Creek.
Yes.
So talk to me a little bit about sort of that dynamic where city council itself has been going back and forth a little bit about what to do with T-SPLOST dollars and what did they promise, what did they not promise. In your view, how is city council handling that dichotomy and sort of what do you see going forward as far as how they're going to be able to come to the table and sort of agree on some of the things that they've been working on?
Well, T-SPLOST is it unfortunately has become very controversial, and for a number of different reasons. Some of them genuine, some of them not genuine, in my opinion. There has been a lot of accusations made back and forth, but I think the city council as a whole is doing the right thing in that they are proceeding to use the funds. They are proceeding to use the money as it was stated in the bond. On the ballot. The language was very specific in certain circumstances, and it's just the Johns Creek City Council, unfortunately, in the last couple of years has been very very divided on a number of issues.
Right, and
T-SPLOST is just sort of the next one. Now it's a huge one because of the dollars that we're implementing. And the need for traffic congestion. I mean, there isn't a city in Atlanta that doesn't have a traffic problem,
right?
But maybe with the exception of Mountain Park. But so it's been very difficult, and it's been very difficult for the citizens who have watched it. It's been very difficult for the city staff, and I know it's been very difficult for the members themselves. I mean, the frustration levels have come out during city council meetings.
Sure,
which they're all human, all 7 of them. And they're not without their individual passions. As you might imagine, I agree with some of the passions, and I disagree with others. But we had we had a student follow one of our city managers for a day or a week or whatever it was, and he attended a city council meeting, and it was a particularly long one. I forget which one, but there were 3 zoning cases on it, and it got pretty testy that day. And he just looked around, going, "Wow!" I mean, he was. I don't think he was prepared for the amount of passion, if you will, that was exhibited on the side. Which, I mean. Who was it that said God ain't making any more of it? Meaning land. So how we use our land, which is zoning, which is probably the most important thing that we do as a city, because once it's kind of like going to the barber. You can cut more, but you can't add. So if you make the mistake with a zoning issue, you're paying for that for a while. So it's always good to make sure you take that slowly, et cetera. But I'm optimistic regarding T-Splost. I think in the long term, we'll do the right thing. We'll use the We'll use the funds. We'll use the money, and I think it will help relieve traffic congestion. But like everything else, it's about controlling expectations. T-Splost was not about finding the utopia, the perfect mix to fix traffic everywhere. That's just not possible with T-Splost. But I think we're on the right track.
You are Mayor Bodker's chief of staff, so I'm sure you were very involved in his veto decision.
Yes,
which is I think it's fair to say, highly unusual action for a mayor to take, at least in the North Fulton area.
It was only the second time that he vetoed an item in the 12, 13 years he's been a mayor. The other one was my understanding before my time was an issue regarding a legal matter.
Okay,
so something that wasn't.
Well, as much as you're comfortable sharing, could you talk to us a little bit about what that process was like and that decision making process to go ahead and veto that?
Well, it kind of feeds into what we just said about T-Splost before, that regarding Jones Bridge, the people of Johns Creek voted T-Splost. I mean, they adopted it. It was a close vote. No one can shy away from the vote total, but it was a close vote, but it passed. And the language was very specific on what Jones Bridge was going to be. It was going to be widened. And the city council asked the Johns Creek Public Works Departments, to city staff, to explore an option that was not in line with the language of the T-Splost regarding of the widening. And it was, I think the proposal was $100,000. It was going to cost $100,000 to look at this particular thing. And the mayor took a very firm stance that he would not support a plan that would not only cost $100,000, but would be considered illegal to do if we tried to implement it. So why spend this money? Why spend the time implementing something that, if we were sued, every legal opinion that we had said flat out that this cannot be done. So why study it? Why spend the time? Yeah. And so he did veto it. I mean, obviously it was a decision that he didn't take lightly.
Sure.
As he mentioned in his veto message, veto is not something that say, "Hey, I just disagree with the majority. I'm just throwing a veto out there because I can." Ha ha.
Right.
I mean, Mike has not been on the winning side of every issue in his 12 years, and he has no record of a veto. So he understands the gravity of what a veto is. So I obviously believe it was a wise decision, and that Jones Bridge is it's a vital artery in Johns Creek. It's only, you don't, even though I've lived in Johns Creek practically my whole life, you don't really appreciate how things flow interconnectively until you sit down with an engineer and they kind of show it to you. Yep. There's really only 2 north-south routes in Johns Creek. There's 141, Medlock Bridge, and Jones Bridge. That's really it. So let me phrase it this way. I've lived in Johns Creek since 1981. The road in that time hasn't really changed much. The volume of traffic has gone up, Lord only knows how many percent. And the road is still exactly the same. This is a road that needs to be widened for everybody in Johns Creek. There was some local opposition to it, but not complete. We did receive emails and actually we even received a letter. Imagine, believe it or not, in today's day and age, we got a letter. I know, amazing. And for people, who live in the Jones Bridge area supporting it, they recognize what Jones Bridge has become, and that we need to fix that road. But so it's something that needs to be fixed, and the mayor saw that.
Okay. Switch gears on you a little bit, and I want to ask you about a city center for Johns Creek. Alphareta's obviously been building theirs for a couple years now. Milton has the Crabapple District that they've been developing for a while.
Yep.
Roswell's looking to do some things as well.
And they got Canton Street.
Everybody
wants Canton Street.
They've got Canton Street. But what do you, as a Johns Creek resident, what would you like to see done in Johns Creek that's sort of in that same vein?
Well, let me start by saying that, Johns Creek is not as fortunate as Alpharetta and Roswell were historically. Johns Creek has never been a city until now. It never had a downtown area. It never had even 2 or 3 blocks that were small and tight like a city blocks, or like Canton Street is for Roswell and the downtown area for Alpharetta. So we're truly having to start from scratch, which is something that Alpharetta and Roswell didn't have to do. Now, maybe some of the engineers in Alpharetta would have preferred,
Sure.
starting from scratch, because sometimes it's easier to start from zero than to try to change what's already existing. But we'll have to start from scratch on that. The good news is that we do have the Tech Park area, which is right off of 141 Johns Creek Parkway, sort of the northeast corner of the city, just south of McGinnis Ferry, which is the county line between Fulton and Forsyth County. And there's opportunity there for us to build a smaller scale downtown area with unique restaurants, unique bars, a place for people to go if need be, kind of keep those tax dollars within Johns Creek, which is what every city's goal either is or in my opinion should be. But we are building a brand new city hall on Johns Creek Parkway. We bought the building in 2016. Excuse me if I'm off there, since that was before my time with the city. We had been leasing space in 2 other buildings. We're in a temporary location now, but we're going to start moving in late March and April. And its location is spectacular because it's basically going to be the first stop, the footprint of building that downtown area that we're hoping to do. And we're sort of hoping that be the building block. It's going to be adjacent to or surrounded by a linear park, what we're calling it, which is going to be home to a number of different fields, places where we can have all of our festivals. Really sort of build like the parade, for example, or Johns Creek Parade. Instead of having it go down State Bridge, we can now have it go down Johns Creek Parkway, because we're going to have more items down there, and there's plenty of parking there because of the businesses on the weekend. There won't be there'll be parking there, but we'd be able to have our arts festival there. Our international festival, which the inaugural one was last year, and it was a tremendous success. So instead of having it on Heisman Field across from the Atlanta Athletic Club, which causes some traffic concerns, we can have it on Johns Creek Parkway, which is not on a major artery. It's off to the side a little bit. So we're planning that with the building of the city hall, that sort of be the first footprint of an area combined with the linear park, where suddenly that will be the downtown area. I mean, I don't think it would ever be something like Canton Street, but it would be something that I think Johns Creekers would be proud to have.
So what's the timeline for something like that?
Years.
Well, and part of why I asked that is that Mayor Bodker is serving what he says is his last term as mayor. And my question would be, how much of that does he want to have in the works and to get started before he is done?
Well, I think any elected official would want to have his vision, his ideas in place by the time he leaves office. So I'm not saying that we're rushing by any stretch, because there are some things regarding the dates that are kind of out of our control. We don't own every square inch of that land. So there are other parties involved in that. But I think he, like any elected official, he would definitely want that started and want that going.
Today's episode of the Inside the Box podcast is brought to you by Strongside Solutions. Are you a business owner with 150 plus employees? Did you receive an increase in your healthcare premiums again this year? When it comes to the cost of healthcare, there is something you can do to control cost without sacrificing quality. Strongside Solutions developed eBenefits, a program that provides the restructuring of the individual parts of the healthcare delivery system to employers and their employees. With only 120 employees, the eBenefits healthcare model saved the city of Villa Rica over $1 million in 2018. Restructure your healthcare, release trapped capital, and manage your healthcare spend as you would any other facet of your business. Call StrongSide Solutions today at 770-4STRONG. That's 770-4STRONG, or visit them online at www.strongsidesolutions.com. So we are back with Craig on the Inside the Box podcast. Craig, before we wrap up and move on to some other statewide issues, I just want to ask you, is there anything in general you want to update us on? What's going on in Johns Creek, park system, anything else?
Well, the parks is actually one of the more exciting things that we have. And when I started the job a year ago, it was something that really excited me. And actually, I thought would be a real unifying issue for both the people and the city government in Johns Creek. We had recently purchased 192 acres of land over in the Cauley Creek area, which is in the Shake Rag area, sort of the northeast corner, the fin, if you will, of Johns Creek. It's a beautiful piece of property. It used to be an old water reclamation plant that the owner got out of the business and sold the land to us. And it's, like I said, it's 192 acres, which is actually bigger than Piedmont Park. I don't know if you can believe that. And our Parks Department has already put out a couple of proposals, a couple of plans. Baseball fields, cricket fields. It's going to be a beautiful piece of property that the entire city should be able to enjoy. And some of the park space, we're bulging at the seams in park space. OC Park and Newtown Park are at capacity, if you will. So Cauley Creek's going to put a lot of pressure off that and be able to add a lot of things to the city. It's just a wonderful piece of property in that regard. And going back to Linear Park for a sec, I wanted to make sure I did it justice, because we do actually have a plan in place. This thing is going to include an amphitheater in the trees. It's going to include picnic tables, tree houses, wetland gardens, zip line, ropes course. So a little bit for everybody there. I think it's going to be a tremendous success for Johns Creek.
So if somebody in Johns Creek wants to kind of stay in tune with some of the updates and what's going on with some of those developments, what would you recommend is the best way to stay updated?
Well, we do have a weekly email. Even I learned some things from it from time to time. So just go to johnscreekga.gov and you can sign up for the weekly email there. It's great with plans and with meetings that are happening every week, whether they be city council meetings, planning commissions, what have you. I think that'd be a good first start if you're having somebody who's going in from the beginning.
Great. Well, if I could, I want to switch gears with
Sure.
you on just a couple things. I know you're a politics guru. You love anything and everything to do with politics.
I do. I'm actually more of I like to think of myself more as a political historian.
Okay.
That's actually kind of what my first love was. Much more of the history side to it. If you talk to some of my high school friends, I was just known as the history guy. The politics really didn't kick in until I started in college, believe it or not. But the two are interconnected. But I like to joke that I'd be just as comfortable talking about the presidential election of 1920 as I would the election of 2020.
Okay.
Which makes me kind of unique, actually, among local politicos, if you will. They stay much more focused on the current, if you will.
Okay. Well, you're the first vice chair of the Fulton County Republican Party.
I am. It kind of makes me the number two guy.
And so I do want to ask you, which is an interesting perspective as it relates to Johns Creek, because Johns Creek just saw their two state of Georgia House reps flip from red to blue. So I don't want to ask you to get too into the weeds on the why for those two particular races, but I would love to get your perspective on, generally speaking, the recent trend of the suburbs moving from red to blue. And, from your perspective as a member of the Fulton County Republican Party, maybe some of the things you're doing to change some of those things.
Well, just to correct you, if I may,
Sure.
The city of Johns Creek actually has 5 state reps who represent part of the city. We were at 5 Republicans, 0 Democrats. Now we're at 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans.
Okay.
So that's a seismic shift.
Sure.
And then on the Senate side, we actually have 3 senators who represent Johns Creek. It was 3-0, and now it's 2-1 Republican. So so you're right. Johns Creek has definitely been the center of a lot of those changes. I always like to, when somebody wins an election, you always just want to congratulate them and tell them they ran a good race. There were some issues that were brought up, especially in the race between Kelly Stewart and Angelica Kaus. Obviously, I voted for Kelly. I supported Kelly. I did door to door for Kelly. So it was a shame that she lost, but Angelica obviously helped tap the mood a little bit in her district, and my hat's off to her that she ran a good race on that. To answer your second question about, I'm not gonna reveal anything that we don't already know, but Republicans have this problem that we're the party of old white men. I mean, whether you're in Georgia, whether Montana or Detroit, we're the party of old white men, and obviously that's something that we have to work upon, especially here in the city of Johns Creek area. The city of Johns Creek is 35% Asian and Indian. It's a fantastic thing. We love the diversity of Johns Creek. Mayor Bodker and the city council has embraced our diversity as much as possible. Our international festival that we had this spring was a huge success, and I think it helped put Johns Creek on the map that we're more than just a city of country clubs and golf courses. Politically, that basically means that the Republican Party has to embrace these new voters, these new citizens of Johns Creek, which in a lot of ways meant that the party has to evolve. And political parties don't evolve quickly. It takes time. Historically, parties, it takes decades for them to fundamentally change their perspective on things, which, one thing, love them or hate them, about President Trump, you could hate them, love him. He changed in a lot of ways the Republican Party much faster than anybody else has ever, possibly with the exception of Franklin Roosevelt. Going back to that history thing again, I mean, my fellow Republicans hate it because somebody asks you, who's the greatest president of all time? And the default answer has to be Ronald Reagan. If you're a Republican, you have to say Ronald Reagan. I say, well, he might have been my favorite, but he certainly wasn't the greatest. The greatest has to be Franklin Roosevelt, simply because of what he was able to accomplish, both domestically and internationally, obviously, during World War II. I mean, just World War II alone. Take the New Deal out of it, take the whole Depression out of it. Sure. If it was just World War II, that probably would have made him number one. But, he built a coalition that survived for more than 60 years, and that's unheard of. I'm not saying Donald Trump's coalition will survive that long, but if he's able to do something like that, then that is an amazing achievement. Now, getting back a little bit to Johns Creek, I mean, there's a great organization right now, Chinese Americans for Trump. Very active. I went to one of their events. They had 120 people there on a cold Saturday night, in a January in an off-year election. And I told the founder of the group, her name is Sunny Warren, she lives in Roswell. I told her, I said, I've been coming to political events locally here since the 90s. I have never seen so many people at an event that was not somehow tied to an upcoming election. So there's a lot of energy there. But fundamentally, yes, the Republican Party, we need to make sure that the Chinese Americans, Indian Americans especially, realize that I believe that their natural home is the Republican Party. That the conservatism that we define and we believe it is, I think, goes very well with both of those communities. We just need to be able to spend the time and the money to make that message known. And that's certainly something that we will have to do, and it's something I hope to take a leading role in if I can.
So do you see some of these trends of the suburbs, at least recently, moving from red to blue as something that the Fulton County Republican Party needs to address indefinitely? Or is that something that's a temporary cause of, for better or worse, the Trump presidency?
I think the Trump thing might have expedited it or sped it up, if you will. But no, long term, I'll throw a number out there. In Kelly Stewart's House District 50, which is 85% of Johns Creek, the voting population, the people who actually showed up and cast a ballot, was 55% white. So we don't have numbers on what Kelly's support was among Indians and Asian Americans among those voters. But if you're asking a candidate, in a district that's 55% white, you're asking him or her to get 80% of the white vote, whatever the math comes out to, an outrageous percentage of that vote. And that's very difficult to do in suburban Atlanta. Now, you can do it in Rabun County, where Brian Kemp recently won 80% of the vote in Rabun County. But here locally in Metro Atlanta, where you have a decent number of white voters who are liberals or very moderate, would never vote for Republican. So to ask her to have gotten that high percent of vote was very difficult. So the outreach that we need to make is self-evident, in my opinion.
Well, so put that in perspective for our listeners. 55% of the vote is white. How does that compare to other Metro Atlanta areas?
Oh, now you're putting me on the spot here. I have a buddy who would be able to tell you that.
Is it low? Is it high?
No, we're definitely higher. I mean, Johns Creek is known as being a city now with a very large Indian and Asian population, and much more so than Roswell or Alpharetta or Milton or Mountain Park. I remember growing up in the early aughts, in the late 90s, early aughts around here, that Duluth and the Peachtree Industrial Corridor was where the Asian, and actually I'm going to use the term Asian explosion, which is actually a census term. The census actually wrote that in, so we can use that. It's not my term by any stretch. But that Johns Creek was the center of this Asian explosion. I remember it starting in the Duluth area, up Peachtree Industrial, going all the way up to Swanee, and then it working its way across the river into Johns Creek and into South Forsyth. So this is a long-term situation. It's just, again, it just goes back to what I said before. It takes time for parties to evolve and to change their message. Again, going back to the history for a second, when Italians and Irish moved when they came to the United States, they were all Democrats. Every single one of them was, they came in Democrats. Democrats did a better job at the time of meeting them at the boat, if you want to use that cliche, and getting them involved in the usually urban political machine. And Republicans were the guys out in the rural country, big business, big interests, and they didn't want anything to do with that. And they suffered for it. I sort of see, at least here locally, is that the Indian and the Chinese communities, the Asian communities, are the Irish and the Italians of the 21st century. Now, if you walked up to a guy who was Italian and he was a Republican, would it shock you? You wouldn't even think about it. It would not even factor into your thinking that, there's an Irishman, he must be a Democrat. That would be dumb. The long-term goal for us to be, and hopefully before I leave this earth, so that the same thing occurs, that if you're talking to an Indian American, you can't immediately presume what he is simply because he's an Indian American or a Chinese American. Long-term, that's my goal, and I'm hoping that the Republican Party here in Georgia and nationwide will work on that.
So we are recording here in the Appen Media Group studios here in downtown Alpharetta. Do you see that trend of a diverse constituency in Gwinnett that seems to have spilled over into Johns Creek, continuing to spill over into Alpharetta? Is that?
I think you need a professional demographer for that one. I mean, Alpharetta is fairly well built out. One thing, a real estate agent would be better suited to answer this question, but demographic trends follow certain real estate trends. I don't know if Alfred and Roswell would be able to match that simply because the city is very well built out already. But again, I think if it was going to incur en masse, it would have already have occurred. Okay. I would think.
Okay.
But ask Jimmy Gilvin next time you have him in here.
I will
ask him that question, please.
All right, so let me ask you one more political question.
Okay. I don't think I've embarrassed myself yet.
No, you're doing great.
I got to mention FDR and Tammany.
You really are a historian.
It's the one thing I truly do love. The politics just came out of. I was just fascinated by why people vote the way they do. Why does somebody vote the way they do? And it just, I don't know what time we have here, but
no.
One of my very first things that I did was I did a summer internship in D.C. for Newt Gingrich. He was the congressman here at the time. He was not the speaker yet. He was actually the minority whip. And I was able to follow him around one day. And his history was that he was a college professor. And he left that to become a congressman and do the political thing. And I stopped him because at the time I wanted to be a historian. That's why I went to school. I was a history major. I wanted to be an historian. And I asked him, I said, why did you leave history to go into politics? And he told me that he said, politics is just history realized. It's just what's going on today. He said the two are intertwined. And so I just sort of kept that in my memory. I mean, that was 30 years ago, and I still remember the conversation. So I don't think they're too separated. But no, I'm sorry, I went off on a tangent there.
No, well, you made me think of another question, so I lied. I'm going to have two more political questions for you. So I don't know if you've seen yet, but the Attorney General of Virginia just also admitted that he was in blackface.
I did.
In addition to the governor in his scandal about a potential blackface issue, and the lieutenant governor of Virginia is being accused of domestic violence. I've had this conversation with a number of folks about the future of politics in the Facebook era. I'd be curious to know what you think about that, where everything is online, everything you've ever done, there's a photograph, there's a video, there's a Snapchat, whatever.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned the Facebook, the politics thing. As you may know, my Mayor Bodker has had a history with trolls following Mayor Bodker and saying the most god-awful, obscene, pathetic things I've ever heard. And I've been a victim of that as well. Victim's too strong of a word. There was a picture of us at a ribbon cutting, and somebody mentioned, I think Mike was holding the scissors. I was probably 5 or 6 people away. It doesn't really matter. You know, they mentioned something about giving me a circumcision. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of funny. You know, and if one of my friends had said it, it would have been funny. But this was from a known troll who is just an absolute scum. And I don't know what the rules are about swearing on these particular things. But being part Irish, I swear like an Irish sailor who used to be a priest. So, but I won't. But these are just true filth.
We're not regulated. Right?
I'm saying as I can, but that's not becoming the chief of staff to the mayor. But these are some people who are vile, and unfortunately, there is only so much you can do about it. Now, the reality is that it's really only a handful of people. But in a lot of ways, I think that the identity of these individuals are protected by other people who are responsible members of the community and are acting irresponsibly. So, you know, you mentioned Facebook and politics. That's, you know, ever since in the year that I've been on this job, it has obviously become a very sensitive issue for me, because nobody should have to go through what Mike and his family has had to go to. So
you're mad about it.
I am mad about it.
Yeah.
I am mad about it. And I, you know, like I said, get me in a place where I'm not acting as the chief of staff to the mayor, and I'll get a lot more mad about it. And Mike has gotten more mad than this. So that's, you know, so I feel fairly comfortable in my current level. So
along those lines, when that, I think, inevitably becomes the norm, I read a terrifying article online about how the next thing is that hackers will be able to superimpose the faces of candidates onto porn videos.
Yeah.
Who knows what's next, but
I think
it's going to be increasingly harder and harder for a voter to distinguish between what's real and what's not real, I think.
Agreed. It's also going to limit the number of people who want to run for public office or who can. So if somebody knows when they were 20 years old, you know, there's a photograph of them doing something, then they're going to have to tell their political consultant, hey, this might come out, and how do we handle it? So that's part of it, you know, the shrinking field, which is very disturbing.
And what's disqualifying?
Yeah. Well,
when the video leaks on the internet of me doing a keg stand, is that disqualifying?
Well, I guess the only positive to that would be is if you have so many people who know that they have photos,
right?
The standard is going to be lower, so it's not going to be as disqualifying as it was 30 years ago.
Right.
You know, there's a line in a TV show, West Wing. You know, it says, you know, sex isn't what it used to be. You know, the old live boy, dead girl. Yeah, I got that right. Live boy, dead girl. You know,
sure.
That standard isn't what it used to be. I agree with everything you just said. I think also, in addition, what makes it difficult from a pure campaign standpoint is you can't campaign like you used to. The old Richard Nixon model, which was you run hard right or run to the right in the primary, and then you get back to the center for the general. Can't do that anymore because everything you said during the primary will immediately be brought back up. Back in 1966, people forgot what you said back in March during the primary. It wasn't nobody could pull it up like you can now.
Right.
So that forces people to either always sort of stay hard left, hard right, what have you. And that's a very different way of campaigning.
Craig, I feel like I could keep talking to you for hours, but I know we do need to wrap up here. So I do have one more question for you, and then hopefully we can have you back on soon. So your boss, Mike Bodker, as we mentioned earlier, is serving his last term as Mayor of Johns Creek. What kind of future do you see for him in politics, and where might he land next, if anywhere?
Well, he's still a relatively young man. As you can imagine, you're not the first person to ask me that question. And I think Mike would agree. I don't know if he has I don't see him in the legislature. I don't see him as 1 out of 180. I don't see him as 1 out of 56.
Is he in the 6th district?
Congressional district? He is.
Is he thinking about it?
For this year?
For this year?
God, no.
No?
No.
Okay.
No.
I had to ask.
No, you didn't. What kind of question is that? No, the field is already,
There's one?
one and 3/4, if you will. I don't see Mike. I don't see Mike doing a future elective position anytime soon. I think he would be somebody who would be maybe something more something on the appointed level, or commissions, kind of temporary sort of thing, because the institutional knowledge that you've built out over 12 years plus, and then his time before the city became a city, is irreplaceable. And it would be a mistake for someone to think they can replace it. And it would be further a mistake for someone to not take advantage of it. So I do believe that Mike will continue to be around, will continue to have a role in things. But he's always the being mayor is what he wants to do. That's what he's always wanted to do, and I just don't see him doing anything else, at least in the short term. I mean, he has a how old is she? She's 3, maybe 4 years old. I have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, so I can't imagine.
So there's no chance he runs for mayor again.
I didn't say that.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Craig Kidd, Chief of Staff for the Mayor of Johns Creek, Mike Bodker, and the first Vice Chair for the Fulton County Republican Party. Really appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you.
Hope we can have you back soon.
I think I can. I enjoyed this. This was my first podcast, so I hope I wasn't too long-winded or anything.
We'll cut some of it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Craig.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Happening here. You happy? Can you feel it? Can you see